and they take me into the boardroom, and a man named Thomas Murphy is sitting there, and he's the chairman of General Motors. The only question I could think to ask him was, "Mr. Murphy, GM hires so many people, hundreds of thousands of people working for GM. How did you get to become the chairman of General Motors?"
Mm.
And he said, "I realized I could never get promoted unless there was somebody on my team that could do the job better than I could. So everything I did was to build my team, not to compete, not to be the boss, not to, but to build the abilities of everybody on my team."
Mhm.
He said, "Over the years, I had developed, and I've never forgotten this line. He said, I had developed this reservoir of goodwill. I had helped so many people build their leadership skills and build their careers that they were my biggest supporters."
Many people want to be leaders. Fewer understand what it really means to lead people well. So what separates the two? Welcome to the Lead with Purpose podcast with your host, Merv Jersak. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations with leaders who have been in the trenches and have stories to tell. They'll share their practical wisdom to help cut through the noise and get to the heart of leadership. So let's get started.
Hey, welcome to Lead with Purpose. Let me tell you something that most new leaders think that their biggest challenge is learning how to manage people. Well, what if that's not the real challenge at all? You know, in today's workplace, and thankfully I'm out of it right now. I've retired, but I'm still enjoying this whole leadership process. But I found that good managers are everywhere, and there are a lot of competent leaders. But as leaders and managers, we're supported by AI. We're supported by all sorts of technology that can automate processes, add efficiency. But the one thing that I have observed that's becoming increasingly rare is leaders who are truly distinctive. What makes someone unforgettable? What makes an employee choose to follow you? And what separates organizations that thrive from those that quietly fade into irrelevance? Today, we're joined by someone who has spent his entire career helping leaders answer exactly the questions that I've just posed to you. My guest is Scott McKain. He's a longtime friend. He's spoken in, I think, more than 40 countries at this point. He's advised some of the world's largest and most prevalent organizations. And his latest book, Beyond Distinction, could not be more timely. Scott, welcome to Lead with Purpose.
Or my friend, it is so great to be with you. Thank you for having me, and it's an honor and a pleasure to join you today because you talk about one of the most important topics, maybe the most important topic out there. So it's a privilege to join you. Thank you.
Well, and again, as I mentioned to you at one point, that my audience tends to be geared to the up and coming leaders, people who are people who want to improve not just their efficiency, but truly their distinction. And so I love hearing your story from your adolescence at the Future Farmers of America.
Yes.
I was a 4-H'er as a young
Yeah,
person.
you bet. Yeah.
Yeah. But and from that, from your adolescence as a Future Farmer of America to where you are today, can you give our audience, say, a 2 to 3 minute version of your journey, how you arrived at this whole focus on leading with distinction?
Sure. The short version of it is, if you remember the John Mellencamp song where he starts singing, "I was born in a small town," I was born in the same small town. John's older than I am, but he played the dances when I was in middle school. John was born in Seymour. I was born in Seymour, but I grew up in Crothersville, which is an even smaller town. We thought Johnstown was the big city, right? But it was a small town, about 1,500, and I got involved in FFA in school, and that was just such a big turning point for me. It gave me the opportunity to see a broader horizon. And a lot of people misunderstand about FFA. As you know, as a 4-H'er, so much of the emphasis is on leadership,
Yeah.
creating strong leaders for the communities that they come from. And so I was enrolling in leadership courses from my 8th grade year on, and I was always fascinated by it. Well, then I got elected state president in Indiana, national officer of FFA, which gave me the opportunity. I'd laid out of college for 2 years to do nothing but travel and speak and represent FFA. One year in Indiana, 1 year nationally. And it gave me the opportunity to meet corporate leaders that their corporations, GM, Quaker Oats, John Deere, the companies that were, contributing to FFA, we would represent them and meet the leaders. So I had the chance at 19 years old to ask pointed questions to the chairman of these major corporations about, how did they get started? What did they do when they were my age? And yeah, I got so many opportunities to speak and to continue to meet with leaders. Really, Merv, in the first years of my speaking business, I was a reporter. I really wasn't a speaker. I was taking all these lessons I'd learned from other people and reporting on what they had said because I didn't yet have the experience to have my own approach to it. The rest of the story is, tragically, my wife passed away from ovarian cancer, and I had to put my career on hold, chose to put my career on hold to be her sole caregiver for a period of time. And so I was trying to get my speaking business, jump started back up, and it's hard. It was really hard to get back on the track. And I thought, well, what can I do to separate myself from the competition? Why would people choose me? And I started studying that, and the blinding flash, the obvious was, if I needed that for my small business, what were the odds that another business might want to know that kind of information?
Perfect.
And so that's how I stumbled into the distinction because, and that, I want to say from the onset, differentiation means you're different. There's something about you that's different, but it doesn't mean it's going to have meaning with the people that you're leading or the customers that you're serving. That's what distinction is. When what you do matters to others, not just is different for different sake. And so that's what I was really studying in terms of how do leaders create distinction? What does distinction mean to an organization? And how do leaders create distinctive teams so that they become more effective, more productive, and the people that they're leading get more out of it as
Yeah.
well. They're enriched by the process. So that's been my life's work, and I've, as I told you in person, Merv, I often feel like the most fortunate guy ever because I get the chance, as you do, to talk about what our passion is about and what we love, and hopefully help some people along the way.
No, that's great. And I am holding up your latest
Oh, you got it, yes, sir.
For those people who are listening and not watching, the book is Beyond Distinction. I'd mentioned it in my introduction, but Scott, what you don't know is that I have your previous 2 books on this topic.
Wow.
And I was wondering I'm curious actually about the progression. You went from Create Distinction that you wrote in 2013 or so,
Yeah. Yeah.
to Iconic, which you wrote in 2018, and now to Beyond Distinction. What was that progression, and what kind of
That's the first time I've been asked that, Merv. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I have another one for you later on during our quick
Okay,
Q&A.
all right. The work, my first book on it was called Collapse of Distinction in 2008 when the economy was difficult and all of that. And then when the economy revived and business started taking off, it was time to repurpose and rewrite that book because business was doing better. Now, how do we create distinction? What happens if there's a collapse of the economy? Then it's because distinction, and that book is really the foundation of what I do. That's really the foundational. But one of my clients, and a great friend, he's the CEO of the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess. So I've done some work for Fairmont Hotels. Jack Miller's the CEO, and we've done some work at their property. And we're having breakfast, and he was telling me all their achievements. They'd done all of these great things, most profitable Fairmont in the world, travel and leisure, and named one of the best resorts in America, 5 stars. And he said, so we've done everything in distinction. Now what?
Yeah.
I sat there and I thought, I've written a book on how you create it. I haven't written a book on what do you do after you've created it, or if you lost it, how do you get it back? Or if you've got it, how do you sustain it? And I admitted that, and Jack sat back in his chair and laughed. He said, well, I guess we're going to have to become iconic. And it was like the light bulb went on over my head, and I went, yes, that's the ultimate level of distinction, is to be iconic. So, and the way I define it was distinction means that you're the class of what you do. If you are a dry cleaners in Thousand Oaks, California, you are the one that stands out. You're the dry cleaners that everybody wants to go to. If you are iconic, the way you run your business is so extraordinary and you are so attractive. People in other industries, the bank looks at your dry cleaners and says, we need to run our bank like they run the dry cleaners, right? You transcend your industry. And that's what Iconic is all about. The Fairmont Scottsdale Apprentice has people coming in from all industries asking, why do you have the lowest turnover in a high turnover industry? How do you maintain your profitability while you're doing so many extraordinary things for your customers? People in other industries come in to learn about that from Jack Miller and his team. And to me, that's what Iconic is about. Well, then AI comes along,
Yeah.
and I see leaders facing these incredible challenges where, everybody wanted to jump on the AI train, and it was gonna revolutionize, and, to use a Scott Galloway quote, it was gonna be corporate Ozempic. We'd give ourselves a shot of AI, and we'd lose a lot of employees and get more profitable. And my feeling was we gotta tap the brakes
Yeah.
because, Merv, you and I have been around the track long enough to know that people said, "Boy, when we carry phones in our pockets, everything's gonna change.
Yeah.
And when the internet happens, everything's gonna change." And and there's been so many that we've been through, and I'm not discounting the incredible impact and incredible tool that AI is. But leaders have to make choices about people, and I think AI is for tasks, but relationships are for people.
Yeah.
And once we start using AI to replace that engagement and those relationships, that's when we have trouble. And
Yeah.
my work with Beyond Distinction is to talk about leaders, about how do we transcend. And the other thing we don't talk enough about is simultaneously, along with AI, and AI's created part of this, I I don't use the word change very much anymore. I use the word turbulence,
Mhm.
right? Change to me is kind of like we're going down the river and we're going to go from point A to point B. We might hit some rapids, we might hit some tough spots, but we're going there, and we've got a plan about how we're going to get there. It's turbulence now. Sometimes you're flying along and the air is clear and you hit a air pocket and just
Yeah.
it's like everything drops out. It gets bumpy. Sometimes the pilots don't even know it's coming until they run into it. So, you've heard me use this analogy, but Rolex thought their competition was Patek Philippe, right? I mean, other luxury watchmakers. It never occurred to them that Apple was going to come along and start
Ah,
making watches that people want to buy. So
yeah.
you don't even know where your competition's coming from
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah.
So in this turbulence, how do leaders transcend that? And what do they do when there's so much pressure with AI and, when your competition has access to all the tools that you do? How do you differentiate yourself? How do you create distinction? How do you lead? And so that's the challenges and the problems I try to explore in this new book.
Well, I have a slightly different question based on what you just talked about. Was it Jack Miller? Is that who the
Yeah,
person was?
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So a lot of my listeners don't have the title of a Jack Miller or that kind
sure.
of uh, purview in terms of being able to influence their organization. But one of the themes of my particular podcast is that regardless of your title or your where you sit in the organization, it's to lead anyway.
Yes,
Not
yes.
to usurp authority, but to use your influence. So how can my listener, an up and coming leader, become distinctive, as you've been mentioning, when they're in the trenches leading a project or leading a group of volunteers or just working alongside a bunch of their peers?
You know, the best advice on this I ever received, I'm 19 years old, and I go to General Motors to thank them for their contribution, to FFA. And they take me into the boardroom, and a man named Thomas Murphy is sitting there, and he's the chairman of General Motors, which at that time was the biggest company in America, well,
Uh-huh.
maybe the largest in the world, right? And it's just the two of us sitting in this incredibly ornate room, and the only question I could think to ask him was, "Mr. Murphy, GM hires so many people, hundreds of thousands of people working for GM. They probably hired 1,000 people the same week you started there, sir. How did you get to become the chairman of General Motors?"
Mm.
And he said, "I realized I could never get promoted unless there was somebody on my team that could do the job better than I could. So everything I did was to build my team, not to compete, not to be the boss, but to build the abilities of everybody on my team." And sure enough, when I developed other leaders, they could promote me and move me to a higher level. But he said, here's the thing I never anticipated. He said, it got down between myself and another person to be the next chairman of General Motors.
Mhm.
he said, over the years, I had developed, and I've never forgotten this line. He said, I had developed this reservoir of goodwill.
Ah,
I had helped so many people build their leadership skills and build their careers that they were my biggest supporters. They were rooting for me to be the choice, where the other person had kind of, done the typical thing of trying to climb their way up the ladder and all that. And he said that was the key. So I've always taken that to heart, and I couldn't agree with you more, Merv. It is about how do we begin, and the way you begin is by helping others be better,
yeah.
not trying to compete with them, not trying to boss them, but to engage with them, to lead them, to share with them, to encourage them, to have high expectations of them. And sometimes that gets, I shouldn't say sometimes, all the time, that can be challenging. But that's the true component I've found about how emerging leaders break out of the pack is it's not just that they have superior skills, it's they have helped everybody on their team enhance their respective skills.
Well, that's incredible advice. I never even thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah,
But
yeah, me,
a
yeah,
lot of young leaders, up and comers, think that they have to self promote,
yeah.
and they want to, and then they think they have to become distinctive by self promoting, and yet that chest pounding, look at me leadership style doesn't work for them. So, uh,
It's so true. I mean, and that was one of the things I had the chance we were talking before we started recording here about. I recently spoke again for the Youth Citizenship Conference, a leadership program at Pepperdine
yeah,
University. I speak there every year, and when I started speaking there over 20 years ago, one of the things I'd ask the students who are between their junior and senior year of high school is, "Well, what's your career goal? What do you want to be?" And back then, it was very, very diverse. I mean, well, the things that they wanted to become, a doctor, a lawyer, a pharmacist, a detective, all different things. Now you ask them, and the vast majority will hold up their cell phone and go, "I wanna be an influencer. I wanna
yeah,
be a," and and my response is always, "Well, who are you gonna influence?" Right? I mean,
yeah,
but the second thing is this, and I was trying to tell them this, is the problem with that mindset is that you are comparing your average daily life to somebody else's seventh chapter, right? You're still on the forward of your book of life, and
yeah.
they're on their seventh chapter, and comparison is the thief of joy. And
Oh,
and so what we have to do, it's not about being an influencer. It's not about look at me. It's about how do you build and uplift others, because that's what true leadership is. It is not, as you said, pounding your chest and trying to get more attention. Look, hey, I can slap every customer in the face and I'm different.
yeah,
Right? You know, but it
and you'll
doesn't mean
get
anybody's going to
attention.
come back and buy from me again.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with leadership. I can, I can pound my chest, but it doesn't mean anybody. Uh, my buddy Mark Sanborn jokes about. He said the problem with thought leadership is there's so few thought followers. So, that's part of what we have to create is we have to create through our leadership how we are uplifting and engaging and helping others advance their lives and their careers.
I think you just helped me understand a question that I've had in my mind for a long time, and that is that I remember certain leaders vividly, even 40 years later, but there's others that I choose not to. What
Isn't
do you
that the
think
truth?
separates those two kinds of leaders?
You know, leadership is such a fascinating topic, Merv, and I
Yeah,
know that you agree, and I think because it combines skills that we often think are opposite. We want a charismatic leader, but we don't want to show off.
yeah,
We want a decisive leader, but we don't want a boss telling us what to do all the time, right? And those seem like, and I really think the important thing is knowing where that fine line is, right? But we want a leader that builds consensus, but we don't want somebody that's wishy-washy and indecisive, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
and part of what we have to do is to read the room and to respond to the needs of our people while yet still having a clear vision. In the book, I talk about the importance of clarity. I call it visionary clarity, so that you're clear about what your values are today, but you also have a vision of what you and what your team and what your organization can become.
Hmm.
And it's that combination of the values that won't change, even while the circumstances might. AI being introduced is a prime example of that.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't mean our values have to change. And the big aha for me in terms of leadership is it's less about standing out and more about what you're standing for.
Oh, that's great. I just had you and I think both know Steven Iverson.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I just had him on. He talked,
Oh, he's terrific.
yeah, along similar with chaos and clarity. So it's
Yeah,
there's a theme coming through here.
yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Hey, I just picked up your book again, and I see this word transcend.
Mhm.
What from your perspective, what do you think or what do you mean by transcending leadership, and how does that? Well, let me ask it this way:
Yeah.
what does a transcendent leader look like on an ordinary Monday morning?
Oh, great question. Uh, I hope they're put together and they've recovered from the weekend, first of all, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a challenge for a lot of us. Transcendent leadership really it gets down to that visionary clarity that I talked about. It's adaptive creativity. That you are. It's not just a lot of leaders. It's innovation theater. They act about how innovative they are, but they're really it's just showing off. It's nothing that's really going to impact their team or impact their customers. By adaptive creativity, I mean that, well, there was a great study by the late Dr. Clayton Christensen at Harvard, and he called it the innovator's dilemma. And he said, what happens a lot of times is a leader will come up with an innovation and then will do everything that she or he can to protect that innovation
Oh, yeah.
instead of continuing to innovate. And to me, transcendent leaders are those who continue to adapt and find ways to make things better and encourage their people. Third is transformative communication. And for me, the research I've done on it says that means transcendent leaders are great storytellers.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Good.
my one of my 2 mentors in this business years ago, was a guy named Grady Nutt, and Grady had been a minister who then, spoke at so many civic events. He said, "It's not that I left the ministry, I just have a different congregation every day." But he said, "It's even biblical." He said, "If you'd look in the Bible, 'Verily, verily, I say unto you,' today would be translated as, that kinda reminds me of a good story."
Yeah.
I always loved that line. And I think great leaders are great storytellers. They
Yeah.
they find ways to use the vehicle of story. And I don't mean being a comedian. I don't mean they're a stand-up comic, but it doesn't even have to be funny. But what they do is they find a way through the stories they tell and the communication that they create to engage people and give people those aha moments where now they see what you're saying. Now they can visualize what that situation or circumstance might be. And the final one is a proactive customer evolution. Uh, that's for external customers in an organization, but as leaders, it's for your internal customers. It's for your team. It's fascinating to me. I used to do this in my speeches. I don't do this anymore, but I used to say, boss walks in and he says, "Jump," and the baby boomers instantly would go, "How high?"
Yeah.
And the millennials go, "Why?"
Well,
You know, and now we got Gen Z in the workforce, right? And so they 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 say, "I want to be the one that tells you to jump," right? I mean,
yeah.
it, so how do we lead people not like ourselves,
Right.
right? How do we lead this very diverse? Not I'm not just talking about racially, ethnically, or sexual orientation, anything like that. That's how. In terms of how we think and how we feel and how we communicate, how do we lead a very diverse and how do we anticipate what the needs of our team are going to be before somebody comes and knocks on our door and tells us something that we missed? How do we anticipate the needs of our organization and our team, and how can we put those two together?
Well, you said something interesting about storytelling because I found that when I was leading teams in the boardroom,
Yeah.
or even my customer teams, if I could tell a story that would equate to the situation at hand, it's amazing how the lights went
Yeah,
on. You
you
could
bet.
just almost see the lights, the light bulbs going on
Yeah.
above the head. So
It's so true. It's
yeah,
so true. And asking questions that puts your team in the situation.
yeah,
One of the things I learned that you ask a doctor, is if this was your wife, if this was your, husband, uh, which of these alternatives would you choose?
yeah,
You don't have to tell me what to do, but
yeah,
if you were in the chair that I'm sitting in right now, what which of these alternatives would you choose for your family? Well, now that puts a whole different, before it was very clinical. Now it puts the emotion in the situation, and that's, when you can reverse that thinking to get them in that different position, as you know from the stories that you told your teams,
yeah.
you hit the nail on the head. It changes everything.
That's interesting because I did have a situation where my doctor, I was in a situation in his office visiting and he asked me, or he was giving me all kinds of advice.
Yeah.
You could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And I said, okay, suppose you're me. What would you do? Amazingly, he came up with an
Yeah.
immediate answer.
Yeah. Right.
So I
Right.
said, hey, if that's good enough for you, it's good enough for me.
Absolutely. And sadly, I think we put not just medical professionals, but a lot of professionals in the thing where it's that old cover your rear end
Yeah.
kind of thing. So they want to make sure they give you all the alternatives, so you can't come back and say, "Well, they didn't tell me about that," right?
Yeah.
And so we have created this legal system where people feel the need to tell you everything.
Yeah.
Customers, and I did a speech here, Merv, a couple weeks ago for this huge automotive group, 140 car dealerships across the country, and it was the leaders of those 140 car dealerships. And I said, the funny thing is, when I bought my first car, you had all the power. Yeah, you knew everything. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Now I come in and I probably know more than the salesperson does because I've researched what that car sold for within a 100-mile radius, and I know what you paid for the car, and I know the incentives that they're being offered, and now I have the power in the negotiation because I have the power to get up and walk out and walk away.
Yeah.
I was able to do that before, but I didn't have enough information to know whether walking out was a good move or not. Now I
Yeah.
know.
Now
And so how do you lead when the power structure has changed is another question as well. So it it's leadership to me. It's never been more interesting and more nuanced than what it is today.
It's funny using the car dealership thing. I remember when I was younger, walking in to a car dealership, looking at this beautiful sports car, and I was in my scruffies, my jeans and my work shirt and stuff. I didn't get the time of day.
Yeah.
I went in a week later, dressed in a beautiful suit, coming from directly from the office. I had 3 salesmen approach me, and
Knocking each other down to get to you, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing how even the way you present yourself as
Sure.
a young person comes across to different people. So,
So true.
so this whole conversation about becoming distinctive, and I couldn't help thinking, as I become a more distinctive leader, how do I know that I'm becoming distinctive versus just becoming busier?
Yeah, yeah, that's another great question, one of the things that I tried to emphasize is the marketplace decides, and the
Mm,
marketplace might be your team, or it
yeah,
might be your customers, or whatever, but you don't become distinctive because you claim you are, and and that's been one of the problems with business and with marketing is every ad, everything talks about how unique we are and how great it's like everybody says we have great customer service. Well, let me tell you, not everybody has great customer service, right? And you can't become distinctive by proclamation. Distinction is something that is a result of what the people that you're working for and with think about you. And that's why you don't have to be a title. You don't have to have a
yeah,
title to be the leader, because we know in many situations there's somebody in the room that might not have the title, but when something is said, everybody turns and looks at that person to see what their reaction is. Right?
yeah,
That is leadership as well. So it's not about your title. It's about how much influence and impact that you're having. Jeff Bezos said your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
And I think it's true of distinction as well. Distinction is determined by what people are saying about you and thinking about you and feeling about you when you're not in the room.
Well, in this chaotic world, in this world that's turbulent, and I like that word. I'm going to change my
Thanks.
vocabulary to turbulent. In this whole approach, what do you think is one leadership myth? I'll call it a myth that's hurting organizations today.
I still think there's way too much of the bosses in charge.
Uh-huh.
There's way too much of that. Somebody pointed this out to me. I wish I would have realized this on my own, but um, think about how well. This goes back to Jack Miller and the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess. Think about how vacations are planned
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Uh, they'll Parents now sit down with the kids and talk about where do you want to go and what do you want to see and what do you want to do. My dad said get in the truck. I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of debate. We're going to go where mom and dad
Well,
wanted to go.
in my case, I could go in the back window.
Yeah, right. You could lay down in that thing. Oh gosh,
Yeah.
we're dating ourselves. But yeah, and then somebody brought up, a lot of families now no longer have the kids table at the holidays. I remember what a rite of passage it was that the first holiday that I could sit with the adults and not be at a kids table. And I say that today to students, they go, kids table, what are you talking about? Which also means that when they start and you're leading them and it's a new hire, they think that they ought to be able to express their opinion just like the CEO does.
Right.
And so this whole top down, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but what I am saying is, as a leader, we have to understand that people might be thinking differently, might be approaching differently. And so the fallacy that, my way or the highway, I'm the boss, I think is one of the biggest challenges in leadership today,
Yeah.
because, one of the other you want leaders that are confident in their leadership, but simultaneously, I'm telling you, the best leaders I've ever met also have a pretty good dose of humility
Mhm.
in them as well, and that in turn is inspiring to people. And I'm not talking about a lack of self confidence. I'm not talking about false modesty, but they take the task of leadership seriously, but they don't take themselves solemnly.
Yeah. Well, along with humility, I think authenticity is a big
Yes,
as well.
yes,
So, and I
spot
was
on.
wondering how you would answer the question of can a leader be distinctive without being authentic?
No.
No.
No,
Yeah.
it's impossible. Now, I think leadership requires us to be our best self.
Yes.
Uh, i if authentic means that I'm going to authentically present my best self to you, then I think it works.
Yeah.
If being authentic means I come in on Monday morning and say, "Woo, man, am I still hungover from the weekend? I'm just sharing my truth," I don't think that works. I think as leaders we are, and in an interesting way, it's kind of an analogy to what you talked about with how you were dressed at the car dealership,
Yeah.
right? It is when you presented your best self. Look how people responded when you were presenting less than your best self. There wasn't much response at all. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying be phony in the least. I'm just saying leaders are called to be authentic, but what they need to be authentic about is the best version of themselves.
Yeah. They need to be aware of where they are, who they're dealing with, and,
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
yeah.
Hey, I like to end these sessions, Scott, with some rapid fire.
Sure.
And so I'll ask you a quick question. You just respond with whatever comes to the top of your head. And here's a question I'm thinking you've never been asked during a podcast interview. How many pairs of glasses do you have, and what colors are your frames?
Merv, I got to tell you a quick story about that.
Yeah.
The answer right now is 8.
Okay.
That I wear different pairs constantly. And when I was doing the book on distinction, on create distinction, I was looking for everybody was writing about Southwest Airlines. I know you're looking for a quick answer, but I got to tell you the quick story.
Yeah. No, tell me.
Everybody was writing about Amazon and Southwest Airlines and Apple, and I thought I got to find something that nobody has written about. And all of a sudden, I had this thought: I wear glasses, so who wears distinctive glasses? And the two names that came to mind was Elton John, always has crazy distinctive glasses on,
Yeah.
and Oprah has so many different glasses. Every time you saw Oprah, she had a different pair of glasses on. So I started researching same guy. same guy. And he's in Beverly Hills, and I tracked him down.
Uh-huh.
And I go in his shop, and I don't do accents very well, but he's Eastern European, and he's kind of a big guy, I talked to him and arranged that I would meet him and interview him and I walk in, and he takes a pair of glasses off of the that he's got there, and he pulls my glasses off of my head and puts these glasses on. He says, "Duh, those are for you." And I went, "What?" Now, first of all, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, he does Elton John's glasses. How much is this gonna cost me?" And I mean, it was more than lens crafters, but it wasn't obscene by a long shot. The story is worth that, right? And I'm looking at all these other glasses. I said, "Well, could I try?" He said, "No, I am Franco. Those are and so Franco and I developed a friendship, and it's, Franco, it's called Luxuriator, and it's in Beverly Hills, but the prices are not crazy for something that's distinctive. But yeah, I've never been asked that before, and I love sharing Franco's story. He wrote me yesterday, in fact, and
Oh, good.
he's an amazing guy. But his whole thing is how do I continue to be creative? And that's the problem, right? He comes up with a great pair of glasses, and next thing you see is a knockoff. And he said, I can either spend my time complaining about the knockoff, or I can be more creative and create another one, and that's
There you
leadership.
go. So
Yeah.
how many colors do you have?
Oh, gosh, probably 8. I try to
Oh,
each different pair, I try to get something different about that pair than another
okay.
pair. Thank you for asking that. No one's ever asked that. I
Well,
love
it
you
just
thinking
kind of
that.
brings out your personality a little bit.
I
And
hope so. Thank you.
so, what's the biggest lesson that oh, here's one. What's the biggest lesson that failure has taught you?
Ooh. Uh, you know, uh, I just I'm not supposed to talk about this yet, but but there's a big convention
Okay.
of a student group I used to be a part of that I'm not gonna name,
Yeah.
but we know their initials. And and they have invited me to be the opening keynote speaker for the national convention this coming year. And one of the things they asked me to talk about was this. I never won the public speaking contest in FFA.
Ah,
I competed all 4 years.
yeah.
My senior year, I finished dead last. Uh, and that was my top goal. And I learned that, a buddy of mine that's a fisherman, we were fishing one night, and he said, what happens when you don't catch fish? You keep casting, right? You don't throw your line out, and if at first you don't succeed, you pack up the tackle box and head back in. You keep casting. And that became a catchphrase for us is I'm still casting. And if there's anything, I wouldn't be doing what I was doing today if I'd have won the contest my freshman or sophomore year, right?
Oh,
Well,
there
I
you
mean,
go.
what? But it was that um, failure isn't fatal,
Yeah.
and you never know what you're going to learn through a failure that's going to end up making all the difference for you in your career.
Yeah. So here, let's do one more.
Okay.
You're speaking to a brand new supervisor, just promoted,
Yeah.
and they're walking into work with you Monday morning and they're feeling overwhelmed. You've got 60 seconds before they open the door into the office. What's the one piece of advice for them that you could give them that might change the trajectory of their entire leadership career?
I would say the first thing you do as a leader is to ask questions, not make statements. So when you walk in, ask the group, what can I do to eliminate friction and help you do your job better? What
Right.
can I do to run interference for you to help you be more productive? Help me to understand what I can do to help you.
Good. Very good. Well, this has truly been a pleasure. And I
Oh,
know
sure.
that I know that you know now that every episode that I have of Lead with Purpose, it's built around helping ordinary employees, ordinary leaders become not just competent,
Yeah.
but extraordinary. So
Yes.
today you reminded us what it means for leaders to go beyond distinction, if I can use that phrase.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you offer, about your services, or just to connect with you, Scott?
Sure. It's on my website, which is just scottmckain.com. My last name is spelled a little differently. It's McKain, but it's mccain.com. There you'll find out everything about my books, my speaking, and links to connect directly with me on LinkedIn or any other social media platform. And I love having conversations and dialogues with people about this topic. So take a look and connect. And if you find the book to be valuable, I'd greatly appreciate that as well.
Well, I'm in the middle of it, so I so
Good deal.
but I think, I come from a world of 40 years in technology, and I find that in this world where technology and now AI
Yeah.
are everywhere present, and they seemingly are making our lives more impersonal, but people still remember the leaders
Yes.
who know who they are and what they stand for and how they make others feel. So I think what I learned today is that distinction has nothing to do with my ego, but it's about leading people and teams and customers and organizations than when we found them. So,
I love
S-
that. I'm
Scott,
stealing that, Merv. I
okay,
love
go for it. So, just again, Scott, thank you for your wisdom and for
Thank you,
helping
my friend.
all of us lead with greater purpose and now a new term, greater distinction. Thanks, Scott.
If today's conversation added value, make sure you subscribe. And if this episode resonated, please leave a quick review to help other leaders discover the show. And remember, leadership works best when you put people first. Let's lead with purpose, together.